And let's just have a rundown of the topics that we will learn this afternoon for the second set of parallel sessions. So there will be two sets, um, and we'll start with these three presentations, and then we'll have the Q&A, followed by the last set, the remaining presentations, followed by another Q&A. So each speaker will have 10 minutes to talk, and we will notify the speaker when there are 2 minutes left to wrap up via Zoom chat. As discussed, we will have two Q&A sessions. So kindly make sure to take note of your questions first. And we will have ample time for discussion after the first and second sets of presentations. So without further ado, I hope our speakers are all here now. Let's start with understanding plastic pollution in Barangay 276 Manila, a participatory system mapping approach to community-level waste management, to be presented by Louie, Deligos, Faculty of Management and Development Studies, University of the Philippines, Open University.
Okay. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry. I'm here in Nigeria right now, so it's still morning here. But anyway, good afternoon in the Philippines. I am Louie Deligos from the University of the Philippines Open University, and it's my pleasure to share our study entitled Understanding Plastic Pollution in Barangay 276 Manila. This is a participatory system mapping approach to community-level waste management. This study asks a relatively simple question, but one that leads us to much more complex answer. Why does plastic pollution continue over when communities already know that proper waste management is important? Rather than looking at plastic pollution simply as a problem of individual behavior, we look at this as a system involving households, businesses, waste collectors, local government, infrastructure, policies, and economic incentives. And importantly, we ask the community itself to help us understand that system. Next slide, please. Let me begin with a broader context. Plastic pollution is significant environmental problem in highly urbanized area of the Philippines. In Manila, the reported waste generation rate is 0.707 kilograms per person per day, and more than 116,000 tons of plastic waste are generated annually. A significant portion of this waste is not properly accounted for and can enter waterways and drainage system. Our study focuses on Barangay 276 in Manila, which has approximately 3,077 residents. In a densely populated urban community like this, plastic waste does not exist in isolation. It can accumulate in street and drainage system, contribute to flooding, and creates additional challenges for waste collection and management. But this leads us to an important question. Is the problem really that people do not know how to manage their waste? Our findings suggest that the answer is not that simple. The problem involves the interaction of behavior, infrastructure, governance, collection system, and economic realities. Next slide, please. So why Barangay 276? There are three important reasons. First, density. Barangay 276 is densely populated urban city or community with residential areas and small businesses operating within relatively confined environment. Second, vulnerability. The community experiences challenges involving waste segregation, collection drainage, and flooding. Informal waste actors such as junk shop and collectors also plays an important role in the local system. But the third reason is perhaps the most important. Community agency. The residents are not simply people affected by by plastic pollution. They are also part of the system and therefore part of the solution. That is why our study did not simply ask what researchers think should happen. We asked the people who live and work in the community. What do you see happening and how these things are connected? Next slide, please. So to understand those to understand those connections, we use participatory system mapping. Though a method called through a method called group model building or GMB. So what does it mean? Mapping is basically a way of making a complex problem visible. Instead of looking at one cause and one effect, we asked what caused what influenced what, and what happens when this relationship repeats over time. The word participatory is important because the map is not created by the researchers alone. In our study, 17 stakeholders participated in the process. They identified factors that they believe influence plastic pollution, prioritized them, and then map how those factors were connected. The result was a causal loop diagram or CLD. And then that diagram allow us to move from simply saying plastic pollution is a problem to asking what are the feedback processes that keeps this problem going. Next slide, please. Okay, so you can now see my screen. Okay, sorry for that.
Yes.
Okay, so let me briefly explain how we connected the study. So we use a descripted and participatory research design guided by system thinking. We work with 17 participants from different sectors of the community. 8 business owners, 4 residents, 3 barangay officials and staff, and 2 members of the Waste Management Committee. The group model building process followed several stages. First, we introduced the issue and established a common understanding. Participants were identified the constraint and enabler affecting plastics waste management. They prioritized these factors and mapped the relationship to connection circles. The group then developed their own causal loop diagram. Finally, the 3 groups' outputs were consolidated, analyzed, and sent back to participants for validation and feedback. So the final map represents not only the researchers' interpretation, but also the collective understanding of the participating stakeholders. One of the strengths of the participatory approach was that it allows us to hear the community itself understood the problem. One participant explained, we know where the plastic comes from. It's not just us, the store, the deliveries, and the lack of beans. Another participant made a particularly important observation. The problem is not awareness. The problem is that there is no system that makes it easy for us to do right things. And another participant said, we already know about proper waste segregation, but not everyone follows consistently. For me, these 3 statements capture one of the most important findings of the study. Knowledge and behavior are not the same thing. People can understand what they should do, but their actual behavior is shaped by the system around them, by convenience, infrastructure, collection, incentives, and enforcement. This brings us to the central analytical output of the study, our causal loop diagram. What I want to show you is the relationship between the different parts of the system. The diagram identified 5 reinforcement loop from R to 5, and the 3 balancing loop P1 to B3. With the implementation of Republic Act 9003, the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000, serving as the central policy anchor. Let me highlight 3 important dynamics. First, R1, the awareness policy reinforcement. Greater awareness can strengthen implementation of waste management policies. Better implementation can improve public awareness and reduce irresponsible disposal. This creates a reinforcing process for positive change. Second, R2, the recycling and livelihood loop. When plastic waste can generate economic opportunity, such as recycling and livelihood activities, community participation can increase. Greater participation can then strengthen sustainable waste management programs. But there are also loops that reinforce the problem. R3 represent funding constraint. Limited resources can weaken implementation, which can lead to poorer waste management and greater accumulation. R4 represents weak reinforcement, and R5 represents dependence on the single-use plastic, where demand leads to more consumption, more waste generation, and eventually the normalization of plastic use. So the key message in this, plastic pollution is reproduced by feedback loops. Therefore, simply cleaning up plastic after it has accumulated may not be enough. We need to intervene in the system that keeps producing the problem. When we translate the system map into practical findings, four areas stood out. First, collection and behavior are connected. When collection is inconsistent, frustration can increase. That frustration can contribute to improper disposal, which can worsen drainage and flooding, creating an ongoing cycle. Second, there is a supply chain problem. Small stores and consumers often depend on single-use sachet because these products are affordable and readily available. So asking people to simply stop using plastic does not address the economic and supply contribution or conditions that shape their choices. The third is there is an infrastructure issues. Proper segregation is difficult to sustain when there is inadequate infrastructure to receive and process segregated waste. And fourth, there is a governance disconnect. Policies may exist at the city level, but their effectiveness ultimately depend on how they are translated into practical action at the barangay level. So our findings reinforce one central idea. Plastic pollution is not produced by one bad decision. It is produced by interconnections within a system. The next question is, if this is a system problem, where should we intervene? Our system mapping identified three high leverage areas. First, barangay level materials recovery facility, or MRF. The purpose is not to simply create another facility. It is to create functioning link between segregation, collection, recovery, and recycling markets. Second, sachet reduction pilots. We propose working with local stores to test alternatives such as refill station and bulk selling models. This is important because we are not asking people to change behavior without changing the conditions that shape the behavior. Third is the policy community bridge. We need a mechanisms at the barangay level that translate broader policies into actions that residents can actually understand, participate in, and follow. These recommendations are consistent with our broader proposal for an integrated community-based plastic waste management policy anchored on RA 9003, combining reinforcement, behavior change, economic incentives, and system improvements. Plastic
Apologies,
pollution
you lost time earlier when we lost your presentation, but time's up. If you can just wrap up in 2 to 3 sentences, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. For plastic pollution in Barangay 276 is not simply a waste problem, it's a system problem. So our finding shows that the waste management is shaped by the interactions of governments, community behavior, infrastructure, operational system, and economic opportunities. But these are also the causal loop diagrams also shows that there are positive mechanisms that we can strengthen, such as awareness, policy implementation, recycling, and livelihood opportunities. Communities should not be viewed as a beneficiary of sustainability programs. They should be viewed as a co-designer of sustainable solution. So if I could leave you with the three messages of this study, they would be see the system, center the community, and act together. Because sustainable change does not come from policy alone. It happens when governance, community participation, infrastructure, and economic opportunity work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've seen the plastic pollution problem in one barangay of Metro Manila. We move on to our next presentation, still situated in Metro Manila. Let's hear about enhancing tourism paths in Manila City, addressing the development and ecological needs of local and international tourists, to be presented by Bryll Edison C. Par.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm presenting here today my research entitled Enhancing Tourism Paths in Manila City, Addressing the Development and Ecological Needs of Local and International Tourists. Next slide. This research falls under the thematic area of community social resilience, and it focuses on tourism infrastructure as part of the broader urban environment, particularly on how streets, pedestrian corridors, public spaces, and waterfront paths can better respond to the needs of both local and international tourists. Next. Tourism is an important contributor to the economic activity as seen in this slide. Next. It shows the direct gross value added of tourism in the Philippines and also in our neighboring Southeast Asian communities and countries from 2012 to 2014 with the Philippines. The data demonstrates the significant economic role of tourism and importance of maintaining destinations that are attractive, accessible, and responsive to visitors. However, tourism is not experienced only within the destination itself. Next. The comparison with other Southeast Asian countries further emphasizes the regional importance of tourism. Countries such as Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand have developed tourism environments that connect attractions with supporting infrastructure and public spaces. This raises an important consideration for Manila. How can the city improve not only its tourist destinations but also the paths connecting them? Next. Tourism path refers to a spatial route or circulation corridor that connects tourist attraction, destination, and experiences within a place. The concept is connected to Kevin Lynch's definition of path as channels along which people move, including streets, walkways, trails, and transit routes. In tourism, these paths influence accessibility, orientation, movement, and the visitor's perception of a destination. Despite the importance of these connections, tourism planning often places greater attention on the attractions themselves. People focus on the destinations while overlooking the paths that connect them. Next. Manila City was selected because of its concentration of major historical, cultural, commercial, recreational, and waterfront destinations. The study identifies 9 major tourist destinations. These are Intramuros National Museum, which is in Rizal Park Complex, Rizal Park, Chinatown or Binondo, Aroseros Forest Park, Quiapo District, the Cultural Center of the Philippines in Pasay area, Manila Bay Dolomite Beach, and Divisoria Market. These destinations are connected through a network of tourism paths and connectors. The map tourism path has an approximate total length of 9.4 kilometers, and this allowed the research to examine tourism as a connected urban system rather than a collection of isolated attractions. Next. The study then examined the actual physical condition along the identified tourism paths. The findings show considerable differences between these path segments. Some areas have relatively wide sidewalks, sufficient pedestrian space, activity shades, and adequate maintenance. However, other areas experience problems such as narrow sidewalks, insufficient shade, lack of trash bins, sidewalk parking, black pedestrian spaces, poor maintenance, inadequate signages, visible utility wires, and difficult pedestrian crossing. Some areas are also inactive during particular periods of the day, while others experience congestion because of commercial activities. This demonstrates the visitor experience demonstrates that the visitor experience can change significantly as tourist moves from one part of Manila to another. Next. This is an ethnographic study of Pasig River Esplanade with Likert scale of the physical environment only. But of course, now, as we see, we have a lot of garbages again and trashes in this path. The study also examined the ecological condition of the tourism path, particularly along the Pasig River Esplanade. The assessment considered conditions associated with river cleanliness, river odor, waste, and the quality of the waterfront environment. This is fluctuating because we experience different flooding and we have trashes that are coming from different creeks going to the main river. And before and after, of course, the construction of the esplanade, which is also a tourism path. Next. The study also gathered perspective of 40. Of course, right now we only got 40 perspectives from 10 local tourists, male, 10 local female tourists, 10 international female tourists, and also 10 international male tourists. The study gathered 40 perspectives, and this provided representation for both local and international visitors as well as male and female respondents. And this finding indicates that tourists generally had a positive experience along Manila's tourism path. However, there are things that have to be considered to be improved further. Next. Tourism paths. The tourists in the tourism paths also identify several deficiencies along these tourism paths. First is the transportation, which emerged as the most prominent concern. Not only transportation, vehicular, but also active transportation, the tourism paths themselves. Other concerns include the lack of trash bins, ATM, signage, tourist services, as well as issue related to heat overcrowding and limited local support. When asked what improvements was needed, tourists primarily recommended better signage, cleanliness, and transportation. So this helps in mental mapping. They also identified the need for public amenities such as trash bins, public toilets, drinking fountain or drinking station, and clearer information regarding destination and operating hours. This finding shows that tourism paths development involves not only physical design but also mobility, environmental management, information comfort, and also public services. Next. So the next series are series of interventions which are 3D modeled intervention and also enhanced with AI. So the next series of the slide translates the research findings into potential architectural and urban design interventions. For Ross Boulevard, the proposed direction emphasizes a more comfortable and active pedestrian environment through improved landscape, shade, wayfinding, lighting, and also supporting amenities. The intention is to transform the path from simply a transportation corridor into a more engaging tourism environment. Next. At night, lighting becomes particularly important for safety, orientation, and atmosphere. Next. Next. Okay, so we have Rizal Promenade. The design approach focuses on pedestrian comfort and activity, followed by the General Luna Street. Next. It presents an opportunity to integrate pedestrian improvement with Manila's heritage character. The objective is to strengthen walkability while maintaining the architectural and cultural identity of Intramuros. Next. At night, appropriate lighting can strengthen safety, orientation, and the heritage atmosphere. Next. For Pasig River Esplanade, it represents special important opportunity because it directly connects tourism with ecological improvement. At night, lighting can improve safety while also highlighting the river and surrounding public spaces. Next. While in Ongpin Street and also in Binondo, it demonstrates the relationship between tourism, culture, food, and local economy activities. The nighttime condition demonstrates the potential lighting signage, pedestrian space, and commercial activity to create a stronger tourism experience. Next, please. And we have Carriedo Street. Improvements in pedestrian space, landscape, visual identity, and wayfinding. At night, next. Active commercial use can create a more engaging pedestrian environment. And the next, please. Next is the Reina Regente Street. Demonstrate the potential for a more structured pedestrian corridor, and at night, improved lighting and landscape can enhance both safety and visual continuity. To end this presentation, next, please. This study demonstrates that tourist destination alone do not determine the success of a locality's tourism industry. The paths connecting this destination play an equally important role. In Manila, the research identifies challenges involving transportation, pedestrian accessibility, comfort, public amenities, environmental quality, wayfinding, and ecological conditions. The responses of the 40 local and international tourists provided important insights into what visitors need and value along these routes. The study therefore proposes a more integrated approach where tourism path improves combined urban design, pedestrian infrastructure, public amenities, cultural identity, and nature-based solution at some areas. Ultimately, tourism should not be viewed simply as a collection of destinations. Tourism is a journey through the city, and improving the journey can improve the experience of the destination itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I personally appreciated the visualizations from daytime to nighttime. And rounding off our first set of presentations, we now move on to Tandok, exploring the reasons behind locals' choice on healing practices over anti-rabies vaccines, to be presented by Jeremy F. Monares College from the College of Management, University of the Philippines, Visayas.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
I'm so sorry, I cannot turn on my camera because I'm currently having internet connectivity issues.
No
But
problem at all.
Okay. Hello everyone, I am Jeremy from the University of the Philippines, Visayas. But before I start my presentation, I'm going to first ask you a question. Have you experienced being bitten by a dog? If so, hopefully you're able to get your anti-rabies shot. Because here in our province, instead of like locality getting anti-rabies shot, we instead have this like cultural practices, that we call tandok, that serves an alternative for anti-rabies. Hence, that is why my study today, titled Tandok, exploring the reasons behind local stories on healing practices over anti-rabies vaccine. Next slide, please. All right. So as we all know, rabies is very prevalent in all continents, with having more than 95% of human mortality. And in the Philippines, rabies has remained a medical problem despite providing rabies vaccines and rabies immunoglobulin, for example. Next slide. And here's how Tandok really came into the picture, because Tandok is the process of removing a venom or rabies or tetanus from a wound through direct suctions of a mouth of a traditional practitioner. However, there's still like little evidence in examining the factors influencing individuals' choices between Tandok and anti-rabies vaccine. In addition, the efficacy and motives of most traditional treatments for rabies prevention or treatment are not yet widespread, and controlled studies are proven in community service. Hence why this study is really important, because it aims to solve a very critical research gap. Next slide. So the study aims to explore the reasons behind locals' choice in healing practices over anti-rabies vaccine. Specifically, my study seeks to answer three specific questions. The first is that what are the factors that affects the decision-making of people in choosing Tandok over anti-rabies? Secondly is that what are the perceptions of locals in the sanitary practices of Tandok? And lastly is that how do individuals weigh personal beliefs, efficacy, safety concerns, and societal influences when making decisions about rabies prevention methods? Next slide, please. So for the methodology, for the research design, we use a narrative research approach in exploring the reasons behind local choice of healing practices over anti-rabies vaccine. And for the local of the participants, the study was conducted in our province, specifically in Barangay San Pedro, San Jose de Buenavista, Antique. So it's like a community with relatively high density of people practicing this communal communal culture, for example. And there's also like a lot of people who are mananandok, which are the one who practice tandok, for example. Next slide. Okay, so for our research data, for our research instrument and data collection, our data gathering structure is like an interview process. So we basically interviewed our participants, and the number of participants was based on data saturation. So when we found out that the data are now repetitive, we stop already the study and like begin our data analysis, which we use which what we use is like the thematic analysis, where we analyze the themes of where we analyze different themes that we found in the interview process. Okay, so let's move on to the results and discussion. So the first themes that emerged in our study is the first theme is cost effectiveness. So financial constraints play a central role in driving participants toward traditional medicine. So the participants repeatedly highlight that anti-rabies vaccines are financially burdensome, making Tandok the primarily options for household with limited income. But also then the result was presented in a verbatim manner. So basically the result was presented in my own local language, but don't worry because there is still a translation in the lower part. In addition to lower direct prices, the participants also emphasized the swift nature of the practice, which reduces the indirect financial and time burden of seeking medical care. And these findings also align with the literature with Chali et al., who noted that the stark contrast in cost between traditional and modern medicine heavily influences the treatment selection in economically constrained communities or household. Next slide. Our second theme is in terms of accessibility, because the participant noted that geographic barrier heavily dictate healthcare decisions in the target area. The participant cited the physical distance to hospitals, long queues, and complex administrative processes is a major obstacle to obtaining anti-rabies vaccine. Therefore, Tandok presents as an accessible, highly convenient alternative because traditional healers are located right within the local community. Because as noted in the World Health Organization, when they say that when formal infrastructure is distant or sparse, local healers serves as an immediate and practical solution for the locality within that community. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so our third theme focuses on the perceived sanitary practices because interestingly, the participants express a strong confidence in the cleanliness and safety of Tandok because they observe the healers using the alcohol to disinfect the tools and clean the wound area, leading them to actually view these practices as equal to modern medical standards. While clinical literature also highlights the necessity of proper wound hygiene, the local in the Tandok community believe that that alcohol sterilization guarantees a complete safety and instills deep trust in the community that the process of Tandok is safe to begin with. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, our fourth theme is in terms of the personal beliefs and familial beliefs because on the community, decision is deeply rooted in generational habits because participants relied heavily on long-standing family members, noting that their parents and grandparents relied exclusively on Tandok. Because they grew up witnessing family members undergo the ritual without immediate visible harm, they held an unshakable beliefs in its safety and effectiveness. This reduces, therefore, the reliance on generational continuity that provides them both the emotional reassurance and psychological peace of mind after an animal bite from the get-go. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, our fifth theme is in terms of the perceived efficacy. I'll go back to the next slide, to the last slide, to the previous slide. Okay, so our fifth theme or last theme is in terms of perceived efficacy because participants heavily believe that Tandok is directly effective because of visible physical cues during the procedure. Specifically, the participants saw like there's a dark blood or like a blood vial that's suction is interpreted as like a physical removal of the rabies virus from the body. However, medical literature presents that a critical counterpoint to this belief because studies by literature emphasize that that applying excessive pressure or suction to a wound does not automatically extract the virus. Instead, forceful wound manipulation can aggravate tissue damage or whatnot, but the participants believe that because there's like a dark blood that came out of the suction, they believe that it's very effective to begin with. So next slide. Moving on to the conclusion. Next slide. Okay. So the primary objective of this study was to explore the underlying reasons behind the population's preference for traditional healing practices over modern medicine or anti-rabies. The study identified 6 thematic areas with accessibility and cost-effectiveness, acting as a primary catalyst for choosing Tandok. Additionally, preserve sanitary practices, deep personal beliefs, and observe efficacy through blood extraction and strong social influence further reinforce this choice. Ultimately, these findings demonstrate that Tandok remains a deeply embedded practice that holds substantial influence and cultural influence for the residents of the San Pedro San Jose de Bella Vista Antigua. Next slide. So for the recommendation, so future researchers exploring Tandok should refine their methodology by expanding interview questions are carefully managing data saturations and examining other communities where the practice remains culturally significant. To build upon these findings, future studies should also investigate overall cost effectiveness, including transportation expenses, while identifying the specific healthcare access barriers that drive localities toward these traditional healing practices. Additionally, researchers should also conduct direct observation and interviews with healers or mananandok to accurately document sanitary protocols alongside reviewing medical literature on the physiological effects of Tandok procedures. Finally, further inquiry is recommended into how personal beliefs or generational traditions and cultural norms or the community as a whole collectively influence local decision-making regarding animal bite treatments. And next slide, please. So here are my reference, and next slide will be the end of that. Thank you so much everyone for listening. So don't forget, when you ever get bitten by a dog, go ahead and get anti-rabies shot. Without that reasons, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was an eye-opening presentation for me because that was the first time I heard about Tando. So that was a very rich first set. I hope that you're all able to take note of your questions for our presenters because we will now move on to our Q&A. But in the interest of time, we will limit it to 10 minutes instead of 15 because we still have a next set. So at this point, we would like to open the floor for anyone in the breakout room to ask questions or perhaps share your insights or comments. You may use the raise hand function or you may type in your queries in the Zoom chat. So while waiting for the questions, some might still be typing. Maybe I can start because I got very interested about Tandok. Is it, well, I'm just curious, how many mananandok are there? Would there be one per at least one per barangay, or in your estimate?
Based on the interview process, there's approximately like 10 manandandoks, like 5 to 10 manandoks in a certain barangay or community. So it's really
Ooh.
like prevalent in the community that the practice is being held there.
But aside from practicing mananandok, do they also have other services, so to speak, and not just extracting the uh, venom from animal bites?
Um, I we didn't really delve more into other practices, but there's like other local healers as well, like other like cultural beliefs that also foster there. But our study just mainly focuses more on the rabies extraction or the
Yeah.
tandok process as a whole.
Thank you. And I noted that cost effectiveness, efficiency, so those are the main themes. Because I have a lot of relatives who were bitten by mainly pets at home. And aside from the cost, one other thing one other resource that would be relevant is time. We also already mentioned that you have to line up in the hospital, etc. But as far as I remember, there are 5 shots that are given. So on the first day, and then after 24 hours, you have to go back, and then after 3 days, and 2 other shots later on. So the frequency of anti-rabies shots and the timing would need to be followed. And I'm not sure if this surfaced during your interviews, if that was also a factor. Perhaps it can be a factor, the the time as a resource. So it's not um, practical if they need to return to the hospital, which is quite far. And in relation to that, how many uh, treatments are required for the rabies to be extracted uh, for Tandok?
Oh, okay. That's actually yeah. So if for anti-rabies we need like 4 to 5 shots and like the frequency to go back to the hospital, which is very tiring. In Tandok process, you only need one. You only need the process to be done once only. So
I see.
how? So the process is like you are going to be like you're going to be like a punctured wound like and then like on that wound that being punctured with the mananandok, the mananandok are going to put like a horn of like a cow and then like that will act as a suction cup to like purposely like suck the rabies.
All right, thank you. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but perhaps anyone would like to unmute and share their thoughts, comments as well. Yes, go ahead, Bon.
Hello, my question is about to the researcher. I just want to know because I'm also curious about Tandok. Does the researcher already try to do or to have Tandok?
Oh, yes. I was once bitten by a dog, and then like I also undergo the process of tendok. So it's basically like I was bitten in the leg, but the way on how the wound would be punctured open to you is like it would be done on your back. Then like the suction the horn would be put on that wound that was slit open to you, and then like yeah, then like a blood would come out, and maybe because of the pressure.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And one question, follow-up question. This is about for the important of health and safety questions. Like, because of this research, I know like earlier because you're presenting too fast and I cannot catch up. So most probably, what I can see on your presentation is kind of like, correct me if I'm wrong. Are you suggesting that Tandok is an effective alternative to anti-rabies vaccination?
No, it's just like I'm just analyzing what are the views and opinions of the participants regarding Tandok, but I'm not effectively saying that Tandok is the alternative. We should always look the rubbish shot because it's medically proven. I'm just like showing you guys what's the reason why the communities are being forced to undergo Tandok, specifically because the communities that we have here are very poor to begin with and are very far to the hospitals. Hence why they are materially conditioned to forced into these cultural practices as a survival mechanism to the or the poor material conditions that we have in the community.
Okay, one last follow-up question. If this is kind of like a situational, because I want to get your opinion on this one. Like, for example, if there's a person is beaten and then they choose a standoff instead of vaccinations, what would you recommend?
From that specific scenario, obviously, I would still recommend the to go to get the anti-rabies shot. Specifically, that is the most effective. And like there still need to be like a lot of scientific researches to be done on Tandok to perceive its to know its effect to know its effectiveness. But it still depends on on the capacity of the other person, and it's on their within their agency if they want to go to rabies shot or they want to go to Tandok from the get go.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I have a lot of questions, but I will leave the floor open now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to share their thoughts, questions? insight. You still have a few minutes left. If there are no further questions and to save on time, if you're all in agreement, we may now proceed to the next set of presentations. We'll be starting with Kalasag ng Mamamayan sa Tabi ng Dalampasigan, place attachments as foundational link in typhoon preparedness of small fisher folk in Barangay Parang Jose Panganiban, Camarines Norte, to be presented by Jessel Ann A. Aragon from the Department of Community and Environmental Resource Planning, University of the Philippines, Los Baños.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am audible po ba?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Jessel Ann Aragon, a graduate of BS Human Ecology, major in Human Settlements Planning from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So it is an honor for me to share my undergraduate thesis that talks about the realities of small fisher folks and how their degree of place attachment links with how they prepare for a typhoon. So next slide, please. So, living in the Anthropocene, where human activities begin to significantly affect the Earth's climate and ecosystems, the world now deals with the various pressing issues, and climate change is one of the most evident. So, it is now a global crisis that affects the environment, different ecosystems, and human societies. So, this is mirrored in different observed changes, such as Earth's rising temperature, sea level rise, droughts, extreme weather events, and etc. So, according to IPCC's sixth assessment report, cities and settlements by the sea are the high risk of climate change, but also a key source of innovation. So, in the Philippines, changing weather patterns and sea level rise would affect the country's low-lying urban and coastal areas. So, for this study, it is a story about the lived experiences of small fisher folks and why they continue to live in hazard-prone areas despite the exposure to risk, and how they can harness place attachment to their capability to prepare for a typhoon. Next slide, please. So the objectives of this study revolves around the determining of the social demographic profile of the fisher folks, determine their degree of place attachment and perceived typhoon preparedness, identify the place-based activities done by the fisher folks before the typhoon, analyze, next slide please. Analyze the relationship between the place attachment and degree of preparedness of the fisher folk and propose recommendation for improvement of planning approaches in disaster risk management strategies. So next slide, please. So this study was conducted in Barangay Parang, Jose Panganiban, Camarines Norte. situated in the Bicol region or Region 5, which is unofficially called as the Typhoon Corridor of the Philippines for its geographic location. So, next slide, please. So from this recent years, these two typhoons brought so much disruption to the settlements of the small fisher folks in the community of Barangay Parang, mainly from the 2022 Super Typhoon Ulysses, or international name VAMCO, and the recent one was Typhoon Enteng or Yagi in 2024. It brought so much disruption to their settlements and their livelihood. Next slide, please. So for the methodology, I utilized concurrent convergent mixed methods. So qualitative data was gathered through guided survey, analyzed through correlational analysis, while the qualitative data came from semi-structured key informant interviews and focus group discussions, analyzed through thematic analysis. Next slide, please. So for this study, a total of 101 respondents from the small fisher folks were participants, and respondents are largely of male and belongs to older age group as reflected in figures 2 and 3. Next slide, please. The respondents are in a long-term residents who are also primarily engaged in fishing as their main livelihood. Next slide, please. From these figures, the fisher folks has relatively lower educational attainment and belongs to lower income level. So this demographic profile demonstrates the economic vulnerability of the fisher folks. Next slide, please. So for visualization, figure 8 shows the distribution of the respondents based on their area of residences. So Prox 1, 3, 5, and 7 caters to the coastal community where the respondents resides. So significant quantitative result revealed that fisher folks felt a strong place identity that indicates their identity is closely linked to their community. Also, their perceived degree of typhoon preparedness has a high, significant and positive relationship to their degree of place attachment. Next slide, please. So for this figure 9, it shows the logical progression from internal to external actions of motivations and activities for typhoon preparedness of fisher folks. It now focuses on the qualitative data. So it starts with how the fisher folks perceive their community that fuels the development of strong sense of place attachment, which then serves as the primary source of their motivation to prepare for typhoons. So this includes their goal to protect their houses and basically not wanting to experience the worst possible scenarios that they've already dealt before. So these motivations are translated into the place-based activities done by the fisher folks in preparation for typhoon, such as hiding their boats, securing the safety of their fishing gears and tools, and their houses, securing their houses, and etc. So doing these preparatory activities, this reflects their high degree of perceived typhoon preparedness from the quantitative result. Next slide, please. So in summary, fisher folk in the coastal community of Barangay Parang have a high degree of place attachment and high degree of perceived typhoon preparedness. So Also, the high degree of place attachment of fisher folk serves as the foundational link in their preparedness for typhoons as main motivator for their actions. Next slide, please. So for the recommendations, first one, to utilize the social capital to strengthen the community through conducting adaptive capacity building for typhoon preparedness and enhance the existing local typhoon preparedness activities in the barangay, provision of a viable alternative or supplemental livelihood program for the fisher folks, because knowing why the fisher folk continue to live in the hazard-prone area despite the risk and adversities, the social capital aspect can be used to strengthen the community by increasing their adaptive capacity to reduce their vulnerability, especially in the economic aspect. And findings in this field of study should serve as an anchor for local development planning, because effective typhoon preparedness should include local knowledge and place-based activities of fisher folks to reinforce their adaptive capacity to further strengthen the community resilience. So as the Philippines envisions that Filipinos enjoy a strongly rooted, comfortable, and secure life in 2024, incorporating a holistic approach in disaster risk management in the priority sector is needed to ensure that despite the geographic susceptibility and vulnerabilities of the country, Filipinos can still enjoy a comfortable and secure life. Because while stories of resilience highly depicts the character of Filipinos or who we are, we deserve a system that works and effectively protects us. And that's all. The remaining slides are the photo documentations from the field. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for giving us a glimpse of the lives of our fisher folk in Camarines Norte. So from Camarines Norte, we now move on to a different province, Batangas, as we hear about the role of the Wawa Fishermen Association in the management of Kalumpang River in Batangas City, Batangas, to be presented by Sandra Denise D. Aguila from the Department of Social Development Services, University of the Philippines, Los Baños as well.
Hi, good afternoon. Am I audible po?
Yes.
Thank you so much. So, good afternoon po everyone. It is my pleasure to be here today to present my thesis, undergraduate thesis entitled Role of Wawa Fishermen Association on the Management of Kalumpang River in Batangas City, Batangas. So, I am Sandra Denise D. Aguila from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So, I majored in social technology and BS Human Ecology. So, my presentation today focuses on the question, what kind of communities and institutions do we need to build today so that they're capable of responding to future environmental challenges? So this is very important for rivers and other common pool resources. So next slide, please. So rivers play a crucial role in sustaining both ecological and social systems as they provide essential resources such as water, food, and livelihood. However, the condition of many rivers in the Philippines continues to decline nowadays. In the case of Kalumpang River, studies have shown that it receives approximately 16,991 kilograms of waste daily, which poses serious threat to both biodiversity and the livelihoods of local fisher folks. So, given these conditions, there is a need to better understand how river systems are managed, especially at the community level. So, in Barangay Wawa, Batangas City, the Wawa Fishermen Association plays a crucial role in interacting with and utilizing the Kalumpang River. However, there is a limited understanding of how their role contributes to river management. Next slide, please. So my study aimed to understand the role of the Wawa Fishermen Association in the management of Kalumpang River, and specifically, it had three objectives. First is to describe the components of the social ecological system present at Kalumpang River, Barangay Wawa, Batangas City, Batangas, based on the resource system, resource units, actors, and governance systems. To describe the interactions of the social ecological system present at Kalumpang River, and to provide recommendations in enhancing the role of Wawa Fishermen Association in the management of Kalumpang River, Barangay Wawa, Batangas City, Batangas. Next slide, please. So this study anchored on the social ecological system framework by McGinnis and Ostrom. So this framework is used to analyze, mostly or commonly used to analyze common pool resource systems where multiple users interact with shared environmental resources or common pool resources. So in my study, the framework was contextualized to reflect the situation of the Kalumpang River and the role of the stakeholders and institutions that are directly interacting with it. So these components interact with each other to shape outcomes in the river system or river health, particularly in terms of community resource use and management. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this study employed a qualitative case study research design and was conducted in Barangay Wawa, Batangas City. So participants included members of the Wawa Fishermen Association, members of the local barangay, local government unit, and the city environment and natural resources office. So the data were gathered through key informant interviews, focus group discussions, and secondary data. Then the data were analyzed through theoretical thematic analysis. Next slide, please. So these images reflect the current condition of the Kalumpang River in Barangay Wawa, Batangas. So the river is not simply an ecological space, especially for the community members. It is also a system, a resource system, connected to the lives of the community members. Therefore, environmental degradation can eventually become a social and economic concern. So the condition of the river demonstrates that sustainability requires more than environmental interventions alone. It requires institutions and communities that can work together to anticipate problems, respond to current challenges, and protect the resources for the future use. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide, please. Is the slide presenting on your end, po?
It hasn't moved yet. Apologies, I think we're
Alright, it's
having
okay
some
po.
technical difficulties.
Ayan,
There we
alright.
go.
It's alright po. It's alright. Okay, so for the first research objective, for the components of the social ecological system present at Kalumpang River, first let's move to the resource system. So the resource system identified here is the Kalumpang River itself. So the river has a large catchment area. It provides multiple ecosystem services, including livelihood, food consumption, and cultural value to the community. So the river's productivity, however, is not constant and it is declining at times. So the system is considered to be in a state of disequilibrium, meaning that the natural balance is disrupted by conditions from human and environmental pressures. So although recent data shows partial compliance with the water quality standards, this remains unstable, indicating that the improvements are not yet sustained and the water quality classifies still as Class D. So Class D for navigating lang po siya. So there are also human-constructed facilities present in the river. So for the resource units, there are freshwater and marine species that are very diverse then also in the system. So these species are very mobile, meaning they move within the system. There is also a need to maintain balance between the natural regeneration of the resource units and resource extraction. So in terms of the social part, the social system, the governance system, in terms of it, the system involves institutions such as the local government unit and the city environment and natural resource office. So the governance is reflected by a top-down flow of information and decision. So the decisions are primarily made by authorities rather than through community participation. And then for the actors, there are identified several key actors like the Wawa Fishermen Association members and the local residents of the barangay. So among these, the Wawa Fishermen Association serve as the primary local actor group. However, findings show that the association is not yet formally registered, limiting their capacity to organize, access resources, and fully participate in governance. There are leadership that exists within the association, but institutional strengthening is still needed. Next slide, please. So for the second objective, so this causal loop diagram, it shows the interactions of the social ecological system present at Kalumpang River. So there are dominant interactions, specifically the harvesting, self-organizing activities, networking activities, investment activities, and tragedy of the commons. But initially, the health of the Kalumpang River, it directly influences the productivity of the system, particularly in terms of fish harvest. So a healthy river, it may result to higher fish productivity, which contributes to the livelihood of the fisher folks. So having a stable livelihood, it encourages the fishermen to contribute to the participate or facilitate self-organizing activities relevant to managing the resources. And then similarly, the investment activities by the governance system support the self-organizing activities of the association. Moreover, there are also monitoring and sanctioning rules that reinforce self-organizing activities as these encourage compliance among the association. Next slide, please. So to further analyze these findings, I applied Ostrom's design principles to come up with a recommendation. So it shows a mix of strengths and gaps in institutional arrangement. So there are evident boundaries through geographical aspects, monitoring of institutions, and local actors in the river management, as well as there are multiple governance levels. However, there are no clear enforcements of rules over the river, and most decisions follow the top-down approach. So, since the association is not yet formally registered, they have limited capacity to organize themselves and facilitate self-organizing activities. So these gaps highlight the need to strengthen the institutional capacity and promote more participatory governance. So this shows that while the components of the system are present, the interactions and institutional arrangements need to be strengthened to achieve a sustainable river management. Okay, next slide, please po. So what does this tell us about sustainable futures? So the study found that the actors and institutions are central to improving the quality of the management of the Kalumpang River. So as a common pool resource, the river requires robust institutional arrangements to prevent continued mismanagement and to what Oscram describes as the potential of tragedy of the commons. So the experience of Kalumpang River shows that environmental sustainability is closely connected to governance. So when rules are unclear, enforcement is weak, and community organizations have limited capacity, both the resource and the people depending on it become vulnerable. Next slide, please. So for the recommendations for the Wawa Fishermen Association, the main recommendation is for them to institutionalize and prioritize their formal registration. It is also recommended that they should start planning and develop initiatives or projects that can contribute to the betterment of the resource system they are using. Next slide, please. And then for the local government units, they must enforce a clear set of river management rules and regulations and must remain consistent with their investment activities. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide po ulit. Thank you. So ultimately, sustaining the Kalumpang River is not just about managing a resource. It is about empowering the community that depends on it. And this message extends beyond the Barangay Wawa. So if we want sustainable futures, we need to ask not only how do we protect our environment, but also how do we strengthen the people and institutions capable of protecting it. So with that, I would like to leave you with this thought. Sustainable future is not something we simply wait for. It is something communities, institutions, and stakeholders have to collectively build today. So thank you very much for listening, and that would be all for my presentation.
Thank you very much for highlighting the importance of engaging the communities. Now let's listen to our next presentation on hosting disaster, care, burden, and informal disaster governance in household-based evacuation in the Philippines, to be presented by Lady Lynn L. Mangada from the Division of Social Sciences of the University of the Philippines, Tacloban.
Maupay nga kulot, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I would like again to read and repeat the title of my presentation. It's Hosting Disaster, Care, Burden, and Informal Disaster Governance. Before anything else, I'd like to throw this question. Who takes care of people who never reach the evacuation center? When we speak of disaster evacuation, we immediately imagine or picture gymnasium, the barangay hall, the schools, because these are the formal designated or spaces, evacuation spaces, government spaces. But living here in Leyte and having visited also most part of Samar, I observed one thing. Some families never started their evacuation in these so-called formal spaces. In fact, most of them went to a living room of a friend, of a neighbor, or a relative. Such observation led me to ask the following question. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the first question, what happens when private households become evacuation centers? Why do so many people evacuate to private homes when disaster planning emphasizes formal evacuation centers? And third, if household-based evacuation already exists, why does disaster policy pay so little attention to the households that make it possible? Next slide. So again, I'd like to repeat, where do people actually evacuate? They said it's about school, in the gymnasium, but other people would go to a friend or a relative living room. Next slide. Next slide. So to answer those questions, previous slide, please. Okay, to answer those questions, I conducted a qualitative case study in hazard exposed communities in Leyte. The information or data were drawn from 30 key informant interviews, 4 focus group discussions, supplemented by observation and documents. Next slide. To fully understand this paper, I made use of 3 complementary perspectives, namely the social infrastructure, which reminds us that resilience does not depend on physical facilities alone, but on social relationships that enable people to support each other. The second is the ethics of care, where in this view, the invisible labor of hosting evacuees are there. And then the third is formal institutions, where it explains why household disaster evacuation persists despite very limited recognition. Why is it that community keep on relying on this kind of informal arrangement? Next slide. So the findings, how household-based evacuation actually works. Okay, next slide. So at the outset, the home become a disaster infrastructure. Beyond providing space, it also gives shelter, food, emotional support, and basic services to the evacuees. Therefore, they become the first informal disaster response. Next slide. Okay. Let me show you that in household-based evacuation, as I mentioned, there is care in the form of the sharing of food, the shelter, the trust, the belonging. But on the other hand, the host family encounter material, financial, and sometimes ethical burdens. Because, for instance, they would experience an increase in expenses, especially when their groceries are being used to share with the evacuees. They also experience overcrowding, the loss of privacy, and also some fatigue. And then generally, they would experience women's unpaid labor. So actually, in the so-called family evacuation, there is community solidarity, but it is done through sacrifice. And there is also what we call the ethics of care, but it is also work. Next slide. Sorry. I think this is not the revised version. But anyway, next slide. Okay. So the disaster response. So we have a comparison between the formal and informal evacuation practice. And the formal evacuation practice, where you have the government, which provides or designates an evacuation center, and they distribute relief operations, and people, the evacuees, meet with official responders, and resources are coming from the government. However, in the informal evacuation, we have the host household, and usually the acceptance is based on kinship network, reciprocity, and there is household care. But in both cases, disaster response is co-produced or produced by both formal and informal community actors. Next slide. Okay, so with that, actually, what would be the implication for the so-called household disaster evacuation? There is a need to recognize them as responders, community responders. We need to support them, especially in terms of resources. In my revised version, actually, there were actually quotes coming from the respondents, both from the evacuees and the host, where the evacuees mentioned that relief operations or distribution was limited to the designated government spaces, and they could not enjoy. When you do not stay in the school, in the gymnasium, one would not get rice or canned goods. And finally, the other implication is to integrate this household evacuation in barangay disaster planning, in disaster mapping. Next slide. As a conclusion, the household-based evacuation is already part of the evacuation center. The problem is not whether it exists. The problem is that policy has not yet recognized or supported the so-called household-based evacuation. That's all for my presentation, and damo nga salamat.
Thank you so much. Again, a very eye-opening presentation for me, because I never imagined that households can also be evacuation centers informally. We are supposed to have another presentation, but I believe our speaker has been having trouble since earlier joining. Not sure if it's due to internet connection issues, but would still like to give it a try. Is our speaker for our next presentation, Greenhouse Gas Emissions and Mitigation Strategies from Non-Sewage Systems in Vietnam, Huyen Tan Loy from the Faculty of Environment, Van Lang School of Technology, Van Lang University. By any chance, already here? I'm afraid Dr. Loy still encountered difficulty, so unfortunately, we would not be able to hear about his study. Apologies for that, especially for those who were eagerly awaiting Dr. Loy's presentation. Let's now proceed to the set 2 Q&A. So I will again open the floor for questions or comments from the group. Kindly use the raise hand function if you'd like to speak, or you may type in your queries in the Zoom chat. Maybe to get the ball rolling while others are still typing their questions or formulating their questions. I would like to ask about the household-based evacuation centers. Is there a specific profile of these host families or homes? Because I would imagine if flooding has occurred, then the homes with more floors or with higher floors would be the go-to as the host family. But I'm just curious if you found any similarities, or is there a specific profile to these host families and homes?
Okay, thank you for the question, because that would add a clarification to my presentation. Actually, the people who would prefer to stay with the household are those families who have elderly, who have babies, who have children, and with family members known as persons with disabilities. Most of them prefer to stay in the household-based evacuation because they claim that in the so-called government designated spaces, it is overcrowded, and they feel
Right.
it's far because they have to bring extra things with them during the evacuation. And the major what's this limitation or is the absence of the toilet or the comfort room. So that was a big issue. So since they are in the village, in the barangay, they will already spot the sturdy houses. So they know how to spot durable houses compared to the depth ed classroom and gymnasium that would collapse. So these are actually their initial way of choosing the household evacuation center. So it should be sturdy. They have a standard actually because of the problems of the cares that they need to be what's this to be responded to, such as the comfort room, and they have what's this persons with disabilities, babies, and children.
Right. And a follow-up question. Uh, do these I suppose that these informal arrangements occur mostly during the actual uh, typhoon or
Flooding.
flooding events occur. But would in your observation, are there instances when the evacuees already pre-book or have in advanced arrangement? So if another flooding event occurs, may we stay at your house, something like that, even before the tragedy occurs?
Uh, Actually, I was happy during the first keynote speaker early this morning, because one of the things that was worth taking note was uh, the warning system, where people warned people in the barangay, especially those with official functions, would go around the community, informing them about the coming hazard plus the risk. Most of them actually talk to this to the family, to the owners of the so-called the beautiful houses, sturdy houses. So they would really negotiate ahead of time. um, I was able to interview one family who really accepted a late evacuee, and they were actually reluctant. But since they saw that the woman has a baby, and the strong winds was already on, they said they have no choice except to open the house. Mm-mm. And so they said, in fact they advised, next time please do not do this, because it's dangerous not only for you but also for us.
Agree. Thank you so much. How about let's hear from the others? We have not just questions, but additional insights or sharings. So we received a question here. To the studies on fisherfolk communities, it is clear from your presentations that bottom-up approaches are integral in creating sustainable and resilient futures. In your experience, what specific socio-ecological issues do they face? How do you think can such communities be further capacitated or empowered to better achieve sustainability at the local level?
Ay, sorry po. I think one of the social ecological issue present talaga doon sa community is that uh, there is a very limited knowledge that is delivered to the community. So although there is a, like at what I mentioned, there's a top-down approach to the information sharing, but one of the limitation is that the community, so the pattern is from the LGU to the barangay, to the Senro to the barangay to the president of the association, and then the president of the association has to go around the barangay just to deliver the news to the members of the association. So from there is a limited information sharing on the when it comes to the management of the resources. So they just keep on using and using the river without knowing about the rules of the community or the local government. And then when it comes to, sorry, the second question is what? Sorry, can you repeat the second
Yes.
question?
How do you think can such communities be further capacitated or empowered to better achieve sustainability at the local level?
I think this is the time where I introduce one of the lessons I learned in UPLB. So there's this thing called bibingka approach. So do you know how bibingkas are cooked? So bibingka is like there is a need to heat from the above and also from the bottom. So when it comes to capacitating, sorry, I forgot to turn on my camera. Sorry, yeah, there. So when it comes to capacitating communities or for them to be capacitated, there is a need for the information from the top and also from the communities themselves so that they could be better, they could contribute better to the managing of the rivers. So information from the government, from the Centro and from the LGU, and information and the because the local knowledge from the community members and the local fisher folks can help also the what do you call this, the Senro in facilitating better rules and better programs for them. So I think participation from both the equal participation from both the top level and the community members can ensure a more effective management of the resources. So I hope I somehow answered your question, even though the details were a bit all over the place. So thank you for the question. Sorry.
Thank you. Other questions? So maybe while waiting, I'm also curious regarding the Wawa Fishermen Association. You mentioned that they were not uh, uh, formally organized, but what was their original objective in organizing themselves?
So when I interviewed the president, since Wawa is also coming from a somehow a poor community, poor side of the province or the barangay. So one of their primary or objectives were to they heard from other barangay Wawa fisher folk associations that if they come off as a group, ayuda or the aids financial to them. So one of the primary objectives talaga was to receive benefits because if they only come to the government as individuals, it would be hard from them to be heard. But if they would come to the local government as a group, they can receive benefits more easily. So yeah, it was really about the aid and yeah.
Thank you. But based on
Thank you.
the results of your study, it's not just now them receiving aid, but also engaging and contributing to the sustainability or improving the sustainability of the river. We still have a few minutes left. If anyone has a question, yes, please go ahead. Sorry, I didn't catch who unmuted themselves. The floor is now open.
Hello, am I audible po?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Yes. So from the small fisher folks of Barangay Parang, one of the parameters for the typhoon preparedness that we look into was the household preparedness of them. So they mainly struggle with how they can prepare more because the quantitative result showed that there is a um disparity between the level of preparedness for those income level with higher income level and those with lower income level. So mainly the economic vulnerability of the small fisher folk who earns lesser than those who earn more does not have the does not have much of the capacity to prepare for their household, such as um buying goods for the before the typhoons, their food packs, and mainly their go bags, such like that. So they mainly struggle with that. So I think the government can support to provision of viable other alternative uh, income source, because sole dependence on the fishing activities is not sustainable for the fisher folks.
Thank you so much. Maybe one last question or insight on the floor before we move on to the next segment. All right. We have another question. To Prof. Mangada, thank you for the insightful presentation. I have always been aware of the practice of evacuating to private households, but it never occurred to me that this is also indeed an informal structure that deserves more attention. Can you elaborate more on the underlying social and cultural reasons why such practices occur?
Hi. Thank you for the question. Okay. So you are asking about the underlying social and cultural reasons why such practices occur. First and foremost, this household-based evacuation would never happen if government-designated spaces are really adequate and really fit. For instance, can you imagine a school, a particular classroom would house or accommodate 25 to 30 families? And there is no comfort room? Again, as I mentioned earlier, most of these people who opted to stay in a living room of a neighbor, a friend, or relative is because they have children, they have babies, they have elderly, and these require space, a kitchen. For instance, one of the host household mentioned about their gas was used up because they were cooking most of the time, boiling water for the baby, and boiling water for coffee for the adults. And they also mentioned about the comfort room and how their house would be disorganized. Sometimes they mentioned about some items would be lost. The primary reason is because they don't have a sturdy structure and they live in coastal areas or in flood prone areas, is to look for space and to secure their life during calamitous events. But sadly, the facilities being offered by the government is so insufficient, so inadequate. Can you just imagine your 25 to 30 families in one classroom, and there's not even a functional comfort room, and one has to use to go out and look for a place, a grassy place, in order for one to, to do some personal needs, or would use an umbrella. And there's no also water. So these are the conditions by which these people would opt for the so-called household-based evacuation. Mm. And again, in the so-called household-based evacuation, there is trust. Diba? They trust each other. They help for carrying the baby, including the elderly and the PWD. But in the so-called evacuation, you cannot do that because, again, there's no space. And of course, there are rules also to be followed. Maybe stricter, we do not know. So these are the reasons why the so-called household-based evacuation continue to survive, to be relied upon by the community because of the constraints of the government services. Take note that in the evacuation, you're only given the relief goods. So everybody gets like 2 kilos, initial 4 to 5 kilos, canned goods. But where do you cook? See, where do you get water? But if you opt for the so-called household based evacuation, there's water, there's even electricity, you're even given space. If there's an extra room, you can use the room. Okay, it's more cleaner. See, it's more safer. So these things.
Thank you so much for shining a spotlight on this phenomenon, which is a reality. And while it does meet specific needs, it needs to be further explored because it brings to the fore a lot of potential complications in the relationships between and among the evacuees and the host family, as
Yes,
well as
that's
the
true.
society and the larger society.
Oh, yes. Uh, I'm not saying that we're going to replace the government designated evacuation, but we need to tell government to recognize these people at the same time to improve government designated evacuation centers. Because the problem with government is the so-called one size fits all, and they do not
Yes.
consider some needs such as families with children, with babies, elderly, and the PWD. They should not be lumped with the so-called normal, with no special conditions. There must be an improvement of the system.
Thank you very much to everyone for your enthusiasm and participation during this parallel session. So before we part ways, I would like to we would all like to award the certificates of recognition to our presenters today. We will just flash the certificate. We can see its contents. So let me just quickly read. This certificate of recognition is presented to Mr. Louie Deligos for delivering a poster presentation entitled Understanding Plastic Pollution in Barangay 276 Manila, a participatory system mapping approach to community level waste management at the 2026 AUN-EEC Conference on Ecological Education and Culture with the theme Examining the Avenues Forward Sustainable Futures in the ASEAN Region, given this 12th day of August 2026 online via Zoom, signed by Dr. Emmanuel Delocado, Executive Director, ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture, and Ms. Marinet Irvine, Executive Director, Ateneo Research Institute of the Futures of Education. And similarly, similar certificates are given to architect Bryll Edison and Mr. Jeremy Monares, Miss Jessel Ann Aragon, Miss Sandra Denise Aguila, Associate Professor Ladelyn Mangada, and Dr. Hugh and Loy, although we were not able to um, hear his presentation. Now, for our next segment, as our day comes to a close, we would like to introduce to you Dr. Emmanuel D. Delocado, Executive Director of the AUN-EEC. He will deliver his closing remarks via this recorded video. Oops, I'm not sure if it's just me. We're not hearing the audio.
Thank you, Attorney Sab. Hi, everyone. I hope you had an exciting discussion this afternoon on grassroots resilience and participatory governance for sustainable communities. On behalf of the AUN-EEC Secretariat, I would like to thank you for joining us in our 2026 AUN-EEC Conference on Ecological Education and Culture. In this seventh conference, we looked at the intersectionality of sustainability, education, and futures. We hope that through the keynote lectures this morning, you had some appreciation on how we can reimagine the futures, plural, for Southeast Asia, for the region to be more sustainable, more resilient, partly through the infrastructures, but heavily by cultivating particular cultures, mindsets, and practices. We thank Dr. Mustika and Ms. Marite for the thought-provoking lectures, which set the tone for today's discussion. After the keynote lectures, we had panel discussion. We had the panel discussion, which provided us a glimpse on furthering the reimagination through various facets of socio-ecological issues the region is facing. This led us to a reflection on how else we can bring our individual and collective expertise and interests in our avenues moving forward. We thank Mr. Udis, Dr. Janice, Sir Daniel, and Dr. DJ for the dynamic discussion. And we, of course, thank Doc Nikki for guiding us through the discussions throughout the entire morning. She has been moderating the conference plenary since AUN-EEC conference started in 2020. So thank you so much. Meanwhile, the sessions in the afternoon, this afternoon, cater to your own personal interests. We received a lot of interesting submissions. So the Abstract Review Committee recommended 2 sets of 4 sessions. And we hope you had an appreciation of how different fields and interests intersect with the theme of our conference. In particular, for this session, you explored grassroots movements and participatory governance, and we heard talks ranging from waste management to public health, from tourism and fisheries to disaster management. And so we thank our presenters and also our session moderators for the afternoon. Sir Eman, Ms. Pia, Doc Roda, Ms. Bea, Sir Jairo, Sir Chris, Doc Pat, and of course, Attorney Sab. We also thank our countless student and professional volunteers who assisted in ensuring a smooth technical run for our conference. As we move towards the closure of this conference in a very special way, I would like to thank again our keynote speaker, Ms. Marite, and her team at the Ateneo Research Institute for Futures of Education for a fruitful partnership which led to this conference. Thank you, Ms. Marite and Ateneo Life. Thank you also especially to Sir Jean Rick for all the coordinations and stay tuned. Ateneo Rife is an amazing partner, and their expertise for sure deepened not only the framing of this conference, but also the framing of the other events in this year's event cycle of AUN-EEC. And I hope that you'll indulge me also as I invite you to give a warm round of applause this time to the AUN-EEC Secretariat team, led by Miss Chris together with Miss Rizzy and Sir Daniel. They have arranged this conference from conceptualization to promotion, from correspondence to execution. And so let us congratulate them and thank them for the work that they do. And as we end this conference, we hope to see you in our upcoming events. The steering committee will meet sometime next month, and in November, we shall have an online roundtable discussion on leading higher education for sustainable future. So please make sure to watch out for further details regarding that exciting event. And with that, I would like to thank you, everyone, and I wish you a pleasant afternoon. Have a good day.
All right. So once again, I'm Attorney Sabrina Paner-Montiel, and it has been a pleasure to have moderated this session for you this afternoon. But before we part ways, let's have a group photo. So may I kindly ask everyone to please turn on the cameras. We'll do this really quickly.
Hey everyone, I'm sorry for going over time, but we'll do this quickly so that we can go home. Okay, so everybody smile. We only have one page, so I'll cover everyone. Smile. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And that wraps up our day. Again, our gratitude goes out to our presenters today, as well as to all of you for your enthusiasm and engagement. Thank you for joining us for this year's AUN-EEC Conference, Ecological Education and Culture, examining the avenues forward, sustainable and resilient futures in the ASEAN region. Before we let you go, just one more request. We would like to ask you to evaluate our event to help us make our future ones more meaningful. So kindly scan the QR code and complete the evaluation form before you leave. And if you would like to request for a certificate of participation, please indicate this in the evaluation form. Now, you don't need to when you're done or once you're done, you don't need to return to the plenary because this ends the conference for today. So you can just leave meeting and not just leave the breakout room because there will be no further discussions um, at the plenary. Thank you so much and take care, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Attorney Sab, for moderating our session.
It has been an
This is-
honor, Rizzy.
Thank you. Next time po ulit.
Congratulations. Congratulations to the Secretariat.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.